Hey guys, Derek and
Paula here.
And today this is a really quick video just to remind you that we're still alive. It's been about 3 weeks since we posted our last video on New Year's Eve, and Paula was unfortunately sick for a little bit.
So it took a bit to get over that.
And we've also been working on another video, the next one we're going to post, that's all about our trip across Canada, all the way to the West Coast and up into the Arctic, and also a little bit about how that trip has sort of shaped our lives since and changed the direction that we want to take our lives in. So that one is coming up, but it probably won't be posted for another few days, so we figured we better take a moment and just touch base with you guys again so that you know we're still here. So one of the things we wanted to talk to you about today was the Ruth Stout Method. We showed that back in the fall, where we just put a bunch of hay on the ground, and essentially we hope that it turns into a vegetable garden in the spring. We wanted to bring it up again because we received a lot of questions in the comment section on that video, and so we figured it might be a nice idea to go over some of those questions and try and give you a bit of an answer as to why we did what we did and why we did it the way we did and all that kind of stuff.
And the biggest reason we did it is because it's an experiment. We're just trying out a whole bunch of different types of permaculture to just see what actually works best for us here, so we can continue using what works best.
Yeah, we had a bunch of people mention that, maybe instead of using hay, we should use straw, or instead of using the Ruth Stout method at all, we should use lasagna gardens, or we should do the Back to Eden method, or something along those lines. And first of all, we absolutely agree. We should be using all of those because we want to experiment with everything. We don't know what's going to work best in our situation, like Paula said, so we want to try as many different options as we can. So far we've experimented with hugelkultur and we've had a lot of success and we really liked it. Now we're trying the Ruth Stout method, mostly because it's super easy. And then next year we're also planning to do the Back to Eden and hopefully some lasagna gardening as well. So by the end of maybe next season, we'll be able to compare the results from each of our gardens, each of the different methods, the pros and cons, and then we can report back to you and say what worked for us and what didn't. So one of the questions that was asked the most in our comments on that video was about using hay versus straw. A lot of people suggested that we should be using straw instead. So I wanted to just touch on that for a moment and explain why we used hay and also what our research has said the differences between the two things are. So first of all, the main reason we used hay is because Ruth Stout used hay. She used a lot of different things. She said almost any organic material would work as a great mulch, but she said that hay was best, and so that's what she pretty much always used. And we wanted to try her method. So it wouldn't be fair to try her method using a different type of mulch because it wouldn't really accurately portray what her method was. So that's why we chose hay this year. It also was convenient because we found a great source for free hay this year, enough to do everything we needed in the fall and enough left over to do everything we're gonna need in the spring too. So hay was just an obvious choice for us. But a lot of people brought up straw, and I think there's a couple of different reasons for that. But if you're new to permaculture gardening or just gardening in general, you might be wondering, what the heck does it matter between hay or straw? What's the difference? A lot of people probably assume that they're the same thing. They both come in a big bale and they're used on farms.
That was me.
So let's talk really briefly about what they are. And by the way, I think we'll probably end up making another video about what types of mulch do what types of things in the future. So we'll probably go way more in depth about this later on when we do some more research. But hay, for instance, is basically just a bunch of grass and wildflowers and weeds that grow in a field, and whenever you chop it down and put it into a bale to dry out, that's hay. So our field behind our house, that's pretty much just a hay field right now because it's just a bunch of things that grow there naturally. If we were to go out with our lawnmower and cut all of it down and stack it into big bales, that would be hay. Whereas straw is specifically the bottom portion, the stalks from grain crops, cereal crops. So things like wheat and barley and rye and that kind of stuff, oats, etc. And so whenever you harvest grains, they come in with a huge harvester and they take all the seed parts, the stuff at the top, the stuff we actually eat, and that goes one direction, and then all the bottom stuff is basically just a waste product. It's not really used for anything that we eat, and so that gets put into a bale. And most people use that to put in stalls like a horse stall or something like that for animal bedding. And hay gets used for animals as well, but hay isn't used for bedding. Hay is actually incredibly nutritious for animals because most of these types of animals, if they were grazing in a field, they would be eating all the grasses and everything else. And so those bales go to feeding the animals. So this is a really good way to remember the difference and why you might want to use one versus another. Hay is food, lots of nutrition. Straw, not a lot of nutrition. So if you're trying to simply use a mulch in your garden that is going to hold in the moisture, that's going to stop erosion from the rain, going to give a nice shield against weeds from growing up to smother them out, then straw is an excellent material to use. And so is hay. But if you want to put the mulch in there so that whenever it decomposes, it builds your soil with lots of nutrients, then hay is a better option than straw. Both will work, but straw has a lot less nutrients in it, and so not as much goes into your soil. That's why I believe Ruth Stout uses hay, or used hay particularly, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to use hay as well. However, lots of people clearly swear by using straw exclusively and never using hay. So why would straw be better? The main reason seems to be twofold. One, there's not really any seeds left in the straw, so you're not planting a bunch of straw in your garden. Whereas with hay, it's got the whole plant, including the seeds, depending on when it was harvested, which means you could end up basically planting a hay field in your vegetable garden, which obviously nobody wants. We don't know what's going to happen yet. We literally could, in the spring, go out and find that we've just planted a bunch of hay.
It'll be pretty.
Yeah, there you go. Always positive. So obviously, if that happens and we find that that's a massive problem, then two things we'll do. First of all, we'll try and figure out how do you solve this problem, because obviously people do this successfully without that. And second of all, we'll let you know. We'll tell you about it, because that's interesting. That's part of the experiment. And we'll also, hopefully in the future, try straw as well, and we can see the benefits of it also. The other reason why some people don't really like using hay is because depending on where you live, hay is really expensive. So like I said, straw is just a byproduct. It's a waste product. It's basically just garbage for a grain farmer. And so if they don't have any animals to use it for bedding, then they're just trying to get rid of this stuff. It's really hard to burn. It doesn't compost super well. And so they just want to offload it on someone else. So if you happen to live where there's a lot of grain farmers, then straw is going to be super cheap and probably free in a lot of cases. But that's only the case if you live somewhere where there's a lot of grain farmers. If you don't live around a lot of grain farmers, then you might actually find that straw is considerably more expensive than hay is, because all of that straw would have to be shipped in from somewhere else. And what little amount is around from the few farmers who might grow it is going to quickly get used up for animal bedding. So in that case, hay is actually a lot cheaper because it's basically just grass. It's just growing around and everybody cuts it down for the animals as well. So it just sort of depends where you are. In our case, we got the hay for free, so it was somewhat irrelevant. But from looking around at prices, since so many of you brought that up, we've discovered that in our area, it seems as though hay is maybe a little bit cheaper or about on par. So for us, either one is going to be fine. One other thing that was mentioned by a few people in the comments was about making sure that whenever we get hay or straw, whichever you end up using, to make sure that it hasn't been sprayed with some sort of chemical. And that's a really good point, and we never even thought to mention that the first time, but it is true. A lot of farmers, whenever they are growing their grains or their hay, they spray them with different types of insecticide and pest control chemicals, essentially. And so there's all kinds of different reasons why they do that for the uses that they want it for, but none of them basically are any good whenever you're going to use it as mulch in your garden. We luckily got this from someone we knew really well, so we were able to find out exactly what its situation was, and we were lucky. There was nothing at all sprayed on our hay, so we're good to go. But it's incredibly important that you check. But speaking about all of our Ruth Stout experiments, we figured we might as well also give you a really quick update. we went outside this afternoon and took a quick look at things because it's been pretty much covered in snow for the past month or so. But just over the past several days, we've had a little bit of a thaw. The wind is still really cold out there.
Yeah.
but the actual temperature itself is above zero. So a lot of our snow has melted. Much of our field is bare right now, and so our hugelkultur mounds and our new Ruth Stout beds and even our garlic mounds have all popped out of the snow a little bit. So we took a quick walk out and we had a look at them. One of the things that I think we noticed right away is that where we had piled up 8 inches of hay for the Ruth Stout, it's now pretty much flat on the ground. And so at first we thought, oh my goodness, like all the hay is gone. That was another question that we got a few times actually. How do you keep all your hay from blowing away? But it's actually really interesting. The hay, because it's got hollow stalks, it's really light and fluffy and it wants to blow around a little bit more apparently. Whereas the hay kind of just stayed where we put it.
Yeah.
And as soon as the rain hit it kind of flattened it out a little bit. And then all of those little leaves and stalks and everything else that are mixed in with the hay kind of tangled up, and it just kind of became one solid layer, and there was no moving it after that. And so that's exactly what we found whenever we actually dug into it a little bit, which I'm pretty sure is not recommended. You're supposed to just leave it alone, but we were too curious. Whenever we dug into it, it was actually really hard to get in through there because it was all so matted together. But the interesting thing is whenever we hit the ground, right, like finally got to the bottom of it, where it was kind of like lawn almost before, now it's really kind of soft. You can see it's kind of muddy, like because everything's sort of thawing a little bit. But we actually were down to the actual soil where things are starting to break down. So it is actually doing what it's supposed to do. Again, we'll see how great that is in the spring, whether or not some of that grass regrows through it. No idea. But so far it seems like it's doing the right thing.
And then we checked out the garlic.
Yeah, and that was exciting.
Yeah.
So the garlic is, if you haven't watched our garlic video, you might want to check that out as well. But we did a very similar method to plant our garlic as we did with the Ruth Stout. Garlic around here, we plant it in the fall and then we harvest it the next summer. So this is the first time we've ever done it. Once again, total experiment. No idea if it's going to work. But we also did kind of an experiment within an experiment because we planted some of our garlic actually into the soil and compost and stuff that we put on the ground before burying it with hay. But then some of the garlic, we literally just tossed them on top of the soil and then just covered them with the hay. Because apparently with like potatoes and onions and a few other root vegetables, that totally works. And we were like, there's no way this is going to work. Yeah. But we figured we'd give it a shot. And how many did we put down? Like 20 or something like that?
Something, yeah.
Not too many.
Not too many, but it was neat because when we pulled the hay back, tell them what we saw.
we were able to find one of our little cloves of garlic that we had just simply tossed on the ground and covered with hay. This was back in the fall, so a couple months ago. And it has actually sprouted and it's got roots that going down into the soil now. And so we don't have like any leaves or anything coming through, of course, yet. It's still really, really young, but it did actually sprout before the frost hit it. So,
and before we uncovered it, so we've probably killed it.
Oh yeah, we probably killed that one. But there's 19 others that'll hopefully live. So again, totally just an experiment, but we were way too curious. We had to find out what was going on since it's thawed a little. So we packed the hay back down on top of it, so hopefully it'll keep it insulated. And then in the spring, we should hopefully get a whole bunch of garlic popping out of there. So we'll be able to tell you again what our results are, if there's a difference, between planting the garlic ball or garlic cloves a couple inches into the ground versus just putting them right on the soil and covering with hay. If they both do exactly the same thing, then I think next year we'll probably just plant them all on the surface because it's definitely easier. You literally just toss them.
Yeah.
So things are pretty exciting. It's neat whenever the weather changes a little bit because you can go out and dig around and snoop around and see how things are doing. So this is the first time that we've done a video like this where we just try and go through some of the questions that you guys have asked. But if you like this format, let us know and we'll try and do it more in the future. We do our best to respond back to all of the comments in the actual comment section, but it's often really hard and to keep up with it all. And since we had so many questions that were all very similar about this particular topic, we figured this would be easier to reach as many of you as possible. So if you do like this, let us know in the comments. And if you have any other questions that you would like us to answer in a future video like this, let us know that as well. And we'll do our best to get back to you with some responses.
So stay tuned for our upcoming video.
Yeah, like we said, we're going to show you a bunch more of our first road trip whenever we first moved into the van, all across Canada, up into the Arctic, mostly illustrated with photos, but I think you guys will find it pretty interesting. It'll be a good overview of some of the travels that we've done. And like I said, it also leads into how van life and traveling in that way and experiencing new things and meeting new people, how that has affected us and changed the way that we want to continue our lives moving forward, and which includes the fact that we live where we live now and are growing all of our own food and everything else. So, so I think you guys are going to find that really interesting, and we should have that up within the next several days. So stick around. We'll see you soon.